America and Japan just spent $34 billion buying yen, and Washington signed its name to the move. That is the first coordinated US-Japan currency rescue since 1998. If you're sitting on 2,500 XRP this week, it's about the rails governments move money on. This is your XRP news desk. The XRP price is at $1.07, up slightly on the day. I'll show you the Treasury's own words and the number out of Tokyo. Like, comment, subscribe, and hit the notification bell if you want more XRP news. Let's roll the first tape.
But first, the US and Japan take joint action on the yen.
We will not hesitate to conduct further joint intervention. The Japanese Ministry of Finance and the US Treasury will take decisive actions if any disorderly movements are detected. We are prepared to take actions at all times.
We have a good relationship with Japan. We're very strong, very, very strong financially. They have a weakening yen, and they wanted a little bit of help, and we're always there for Japan.
That was Japan's finance minister, and then Trump on the same tape. In the last 96 hours, the United States and Japan bought yen together for the first time since 1998. When US governments push money at that size across the dollar-yen border, they lean on settlement rails. The plumbing, money crosses when it changes countries. Those rails were built decades ago, and they settle in days. The XRP ledger settles cross-currency value in seconds for fractions of a cent. That's the job XRP was designed for, the bridge between those two currencies, and the man who signed the American side put more on the record. From Treasury Scott Bessent, the Trump administration delivers for America's trusted partners. Economic security is national security, and the US-Japan alliance is built for both. The proof is on your screen. Scott Bessent, the US Treasury Secretary, we will not hesitate to participate in further joint intervention. His post calls them Friday's coordinated foreign exchange actions. He backs Japan's push to correct what he calls the substantial undervaluation of the yen, and buried lower sits the line I care most about. The FIMA repo facility gets upsized in the coming months. In plain language, that is the window where foreign central banks borrow dollars against the treasuries they hold. And Bessent just said it's getting bigger. Every serious upgrade conversation about that old plumbing runs through what the XRP ledger already does, and Tokyo put a number on Friday's move. Hold on, because it's bigger than you think.
Is Bloomberg Brief. I'm Bonnie Quinn in New York. Some breaking news now. Bank of Japan data suggesting Japan intervention of about 5.3 trillion yen on Friday. So again, we're getting figures on that Friday intervention. 5.3 trillion yen suggested by Bank of Japan data.
5.3 trillion yen, about $34 billion in one day, and the reading is suggested by Bank of Japan's data. Sit with that the way I did. $34 billion crossed the border in an afternoon, government to government. Every hour that money sits mid-flight, somebody carries the risk on it. Shrinking that windows from days to seconds is not a dream. It's the product XRP already ships. So why did the yen need rescuing at all? I'll pay that off before the end of the video, and it ends at XRP's front door. First, Washington is running a second standoff, and it touches the Clarity Act directly. From Eleanor Terrett, the White House has not yet responded to the ethics counter-proposal by Senator Tom Tillis and Senator Ruben Gallego last Thursday, according to a source familiar with the matter. A deal on the Clarity Act's biggest outstanding issue has yet to materialize heading into the week of a potential vote. That is Eleanor Terrett's reporting, and her read, line by line. The White House has not yet responded to the ethics counter-proposal from Senators Tom Tillis and Ruben Gallego, sent from her reporting last night. This fight sits inside XRP's rulebook, the Clarity Act, and here is the standoff in plain terms. The counter-proposal puts state attorney generals in the enforcement seat on the ethics rule. The White House has not yet answered, and Thune not filed for the vote that ends this debate. But hear the part that matters. Neither side is fighting over whether digital assets get their rules. The fight is over who policies the politicians, which means the Clarity Act is in the hanging stage, not the dying stage. So tonight's question, does the Clarity Act clear the Senate before the next big ETF month or after? Drop before or after in the comments. Tap the like, subscribe, and notification bell while you're down there. And speaking of ETFs, the whole dashboard is on your screen right now. The honest number first, July printed $27.27 million of net inflows, the second worst month since his fund's launch. Now, Read the lines around it. Cumulative inflows sit at 1.51 billion, with 1.1 billion parked inside the funds tonight. Last week alone, they added $14.86 million, and Bitwise's XRP fund holds $510 million just by itself. A slow month did not shrink the stack. It grew every week. Money that runs scared leaves. This money stayed and kept buying. Now, the payoff I promised you. Why did the yen fall in the first place? Give me 30 seconds. It is the whole XRP story in one lesson. Let's roll the tape.
The yen falling, and why is it in the US's economic interest to help keep it higher?
There are a number of reasons why the yen has been depreciating over time. Number one, when I think about foreign exchange or currency valuations, in general, theoretically, they're driven by changes in expectations of interest rate differentials. It's a mouthful. But basically, if you think about it, if you're an investor and you're in Australia and you can only get a 3% interest rate here, but you can get a 6% interest rate somewhere else, you might be tempted to move your money to that other country to get a higher yield. So the bigger the differential, the more there's an incentive to move your money into a different currency to get those yields. Well, what's been happening this year, especially since the US and Israel attacked Iran, is expectations for US interest rates have gone up by about 1 percentage point. So if you look at what the market is saying Fed funds rate will be at the end of this year, it's now saying around 4%, whereas at the end of February, it was saying 3%. So the attraction for moving money out of Japan to the United States has gone up. And I should note, by the way, interest rate expectations in Japan have not changed at all since February, so that's an extra 100 basis points net. So that's one reason. The other might be AI. A lot of money globally has been moving to the US to try to play the AI trade. And so there has been speculation that that might also be a vulnerability of the US if the AI story in any way starts to reverse.
Japan is now the largest holder of US treasuries. The US doesn't want to risk Japan selling those off anytime soon in order to defend its own currency, does it?
The US has, I think, a problem in this regard. We have over $39.5 trillion US dollars of treasuries outstanding, 31.5 trillion of those owned by the public, meaning the other 8 trillion are owned by government retirement funds and other entities. Out of the 39.5 trillion of treasuries, 9.6 trillion is owned by foreigners. 1.2 trillion of that is owned by Japanese investors. So it's, 1/8 of all of the foreign holdings. So bottom line is, given that we've had many years of Japanese rates being close to zero, well below US rates, well below rates in Australia and New Zealand, for example, a lot of Japanese high net worth investors and big pension plans looked and said, we can pick up extra yield, we'll get a higher interest rate. And in many cases, they did not hedge the currency, meaning they basically sold yen, bought US dollars. And while the yen has been going down in value, they made money on the extra interest and they made money on the currency. There's this kind of balancing act for the US of we want the Japanese to be buying our treasuries, but as they normalize interest rates, at some point, the Japanese yen may well start to strengthen, which decreases the attractiveness of US treasuries on an unhedged basis. And if you have to start hedging, it's not really attractive at all for a Japanese investor. And we have to fund these $2 trillion a year deficits we're still running on top of all that debt.
There is my answer in one word: yield. Money borrows the cheap yen and leaves it chasing a 6% rate somewhere else. A currency sags when money borrows and it leaves. Now flip that picture. A bridge asset earns its seat when money crosses it to settle. And a settlement is the lane XRP was built for. Movement, not leverage. Governments just spent $34 billion fighting the old game, and one of the most followed XRP chartists just put it in writing. Read his words with me. Here, the traditional yen carry trade depends on borrowing. Borrow yen, sell yen, buy foreign assets. An XRP model would depend on movement rather than leverage. Hold value where it's productive. Bridge only when payments is required, and then settle immediately. The traditional yen carry trade depends on borrowing. An XRP-enabled model would depend on movement rather than leverage. Bridge only when payment is required, then settle immediately. This is one analyst's frame. It's not a done deal, but it is the lesson Tokyo paid $34 billion to learn. And while the macro desks argued, the police quietly moved onto XRP's rulebook. Before you go anywhere, I need you to see this once more. Law enforcement support for the Clarity Act continues to expand. The Major City Chiefs Association calls the bill's new law enforcement provisions a meaningful step noting the legislation would formalize information sharing with financial institutions and digital asset providers, strengthening anti-money laundering and suspicious activities reporting requirements, establish a federal working group to address the illicit use of digital assets. The Major City Chiefs Association calls the Clarity Act's law enforcement provisions a meaningful step, and the major county sheriffs of America, sheriffs serving 130 million Americans, moved to neutral on the section they'd been fighting. In plain language, the police just stopped objecting. And when law enforcement drops its objection, a senator loses his last easy excuse to sit on the fence. Now pull up the live XRP chart with me. You can see the price right now is at $1.07. Your XRP news today in one line. The government started moving money at size, and the rails they will need already exist. So here's the map I'm watching. Zones and continuous conditions. Nothing promised. $3 to $7 the day the Clarity Act crosses the finish line. $10 to $30 once the ETF money arrives in full. Beyond that, only when banks settle across the bridge at scale. And two governments just showed you what scale looks like. The demand XRP was built for just introduced itself on camera and in writing. Like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell, stack facts, not fear, and I'll see you in the next video.